Season 2 of the Overwatch Champions series is only a month away, and this video will be your guide to what's new next season, and trust me, there's a lot. We've had a lot happen these past few weeks. Hero bans announced, Energy Shock and Toronto Defiant leaving the scene, and certain teams will be receiving in-game skins. We'll also take a look at some rumors regarding partnered teams and LAN locations. Let's get right into it. I want to start with hero bans straight away. That's probably why you clicked on this video, and I'm not here to waste your time. Hero bans were an expected change, but this implementation is unique and does have a particular controversial aspect to it. Let's get into the basics first. Both teams get to ban one hero each map, and those bans affect both teams. This means that on each map, 2 heroes will be banned. There are some limitations to what heroes teams can ban at any given time. The first is that you cannot ban the same hero twice during a match. So if you ban Tracer on Ilios map 1, the same team can't ban Tracer again the rest of the match. The second limitation is that each team has to ban a hero from a different role. So if Team 1 is the first to ban and wants to ban Echo, Team 2 cannot ban another DPS hero and has to ban a tank or support hero. This also means that ban order is important, and that having the first ban allows you to protect a role from being banned. In the Soup Cup, as one example, a team went as far as banning Lifeweaver, the worst support by far, just to protect the support role from getting banned by their opponent. You'll see this when a team wants to protect a role from bans, while also not wanting to expend a valuable ban such as a Lucio, Brig, or Ana ban, because you can't ban the same hero twice. The ban order for the first map is decided by seeding. The higher seeded team has the first ban and also has the map pick like last season. After the first map, the first ban and map pick go to the losing team. If there's a tie, ban advantage goes to the team that banned first during the tied map. Some tournaments with bans have allowed the team with the first ban to swap and take the second ban instead, but in the OWCS, you cannot swap who has the first and second ban. Now, for the controversial part. Before the hero ban process occurs, teams must submit their rosters. As an example, let's say you decide to sub your Winston specialist in on Watchpoint Gibraltar. Pretty standard. Because hero bans occur after the roster has been submitted, the opposing team can now target their ban at your Winston player. If they have the first ban, they can just ban Winston and force your specialist onto an uncomfortable hero. If they have the second ban, you do have options. You can ban any tank hero to protect Winston from getting banned, but your opponent can still hinder your Winston player with a ban on Ana or Brig. You can see why this decision might be controversial. Yes, there are ways to work with a specialist, especially if you have ban advantage, but generally specialists are placed at a massive disadvantage this year. The roster maximum has also remained small, each team can only have 7 players, so flexible teams will be rewarded even more than they were last season. If there is any aspect of the hero ban system that might be changed prior to the start of the season, it's this, so keep an eye out. Honestly, I don't personally have a strong opinion either way at the moment. Hero bans have some positives and negatives, so before we move on, let's talk about them. The primary negative is that hero bans punish players and teams that specialize in specific heroes and strategies. The old London Spitfire Reinhardt strat is a good example of something that hero bans would severely limit. Yes, you can only ban a hero once, but you can ban different parts of a composition throughout the match to hinder your opponent. Some people might see one-trick teams as low skill, but I would argue you get to see a team push a composition to its limits, and they often become some of the most fun teams to watch that defy the meta. You could also see compositions such as Crazy Raccoon's Ball banned on Lijiang Tower or Ilios. Crazy Raccoon are a flexible team, so they would be fine, but that does take a bit of excitement away when an interesting hero like Ball is banned where he's strongest. Hero bans also make it harder to practice and prepare for matches, and teams might end up playing compositions they've never played on a specific map before in a tournament match, which lowers the level of play. The final issue with hero bans is that they have a negative impact on the broadcast. They can add time between maps, and that's when viewers leave. There are good things about hero bans, even despite a lot of potential negatives. The first is that they can allow for diversity in a stagnant meta. A good example is the most recent Malga Reaper Echo meta. There's a catch though. Remember that teams won't always be banning the strongest heroes. They'll use bans to provide them with an advantage. If 2 teams want to take the Malga mirror, they will. They do not care if that's entertaining for you or not. They are playing to win. Hero bans also create some interesting variations of meta compositions. In Soup Cup, we saw a lot of Hazard when he wasn't banned, but we saw plenty of different Hazard compositions instead of the same one over and over again. So even if a match is two teams playing Hazard mirrors, the compositions might be slightly different each time, making it more interesting. Regarding the delay on broadcast, I actually know for a fact that OWCS staff are working behind the scenes to reduce the impact that hero bans will have on broadcast. We might even have the same or less amount of time between maps compared to the last season, which didn't have hero bans. There are plenty of positives and negatives to hero bans, and honestly, I'm neutral at this point. My personal preference as a viewer is to watch the highest level of Overwatch possible, which means no bans, but also that preference arises from my experience as a coach. For the longevity and success of the esport, hero bans might be the answer, and I'll take that over my personal preferences any day. We should make Overwatch esports more entertaining and approachable for the average viewer, and hero bans might help. As one final note, it's unclear if Faceit League, which will be acting as the Tier 2 division next season, will have hero bans. The OWCS rulebook currently states, at this time, hero bans are only being implemented in Overwatch Champions Series. I personally feel that it would make more sense for Faceit to have bans as it is acting as the lower division of OWCS, but for now, it seems that that won't be the case. I actually reached out to staff with this question, so if I get an answer, I'll leave it in the comments below. Our next topic is the map pool, because this season it looks very different from before. There are 4 mode groups: Control, Hybrid plus Flashpoint, Push plus Clash, and Escort. Just like last season, every match begins with Control, and then the loser can pick from the remaining groups. Here's the starting map pool for Stage 1 next season. Control has Lijiang Tower, Nepal, and Samoa. Hybrid plus Flashpoint has Blizzard World, Eichenwald, Numbani, and Suravasa. Push plus Clash has Colosseo, Esperanza, and Hanaoka. And Escort has Dorado, Havana, and Route 66. This map pool is weird and interesting, and its reduced size will have an impact on the flow of matches. As an example, let's see how a pretend match would play out. Map 1 is Control, like normal, and let's say Map 2, Hybrid plus Flashpoint, was chosen. Map 3, Escort, was chosen, but now for Map 4, we only have one map type left: Push plus Clash. This means that for Map 4, the losing team will be forced onto the remaining map group. For Map 5, I'm under the impression that the map groups reset, so the losing team can choose a map from any group as long as it hasn't previously been played. I actually reached out to a staff member about this question as well, and from our conversation, I am under the impression that this is how the map choices work, although I was told to wait for the official rulebook in case anything changes. If this changes, I'll include it in a pinned comment below. This map pool is a little controversial, but I personally prefer the direction they've taken this year with the combined map groups. Full disclosure, I actually got to provide feedback and suggestions for the OWCS format this year. They've done a great job of reaching out and speaking to players, staff, and content creators this year, so it's clear that they care about the community as a whole. They went from refusing to provide any content creators with OPR accounts for the Dallas Major, to providing the likes of Tomathan, Commander X, and myself with exclusive OPR access for Stockholm so that we could view the replay codes. I didn't even have to ask, they just emailed me with the account details one day, and it was kind of awesome. Enough with the staff glazing, let's get right into what my suggestions for the map pool were. I'm personally in favor of reducing the size of the map pool. For Stockholm Finals, we had a total of 16 maps, and that's a lot. For reference, a team can only play around 5 to 6 maps during a scrim, which is how teams get their practice. So to practice all 16 maps once, you need at least 3 scrims. And since each scrim is around 2 hours long, that's 6 hours total. This is also assuming that each scrim was high quality. If you're stomping your opponent, the scrim really isn't useful to you. Now, with the introduction of hero bans, practicing a massive map pool would be even more difficult because you have to account for bans. In my opinion, the optimal map pool is around 12 to 13 maps, no more and no less. My first idea to achieve a smaller map pool was to rotate game modes. The groups are Control, Escort, Hybrid, Push, and Flashpoint plus Clash, and only 4 of those groups are available each stage. Control would always remain in rotation. Each group would have 3 maps adding up to a total of 12, so first stage you might have Control, Push, Flashpoint plus Clash, and Escort, leaving Hybrid out. For the second stage, you could have Control, Hybrid, Push, and Escort, this time leaving Flashpoint plus Clash out of the mix. This is a system that makes the most sense to me, and it only leaves one game mode out most of the time. That is a problem though, because it seems that the goal is to try and have every game mode available in the map pool. I'm under the impression that Blizzard is very against leaving game modes out, even for a short period of time. So with that in mind, my second idea included every game mode, but that was a bit less optimal. The groups are Control, Escort, Hybrid, and Push plus Flashpoint plus Clash. 4 groups, similar to the newly announced map pool. Combining 3 game modes might seem a bit overkill, but for reference, if you add up every Push, Flashpoint, and Clash map, you get 8, which is comparable to other groups. Escort has 8 maps, Hybrid 7, Control 7, and so on. The one disadvantage to this combination of 3 game modes is that you definitely see less of the game modes themselves, even if you see a comparable amount of the maps. It's not perfect, but it was my personal solution that reduced the map pool effectively, and it seems that they went with something similar. Hybrid plus Flashpoint is a little awkward, and we might not see much Flashpoint played, but I feel the sacrifice is worth it so that teams can properly prepare for their matches with a smaller pool. The next thing we should talk about before we get into the format is the partner system. Next season, 9 teams will have the opportunity to directly partner with OWCS, which will grant them team skins that will greatly increase their revenue. It seems that there will be 3 partnered teams for each region: NA, EMEA, and Asia. This has brought a lot of new organizations into the scene as everyone rushes to fight for these partner slots, and it has also resulted in the scene losing some organizations from last year that didn't make the cut. We have an idea of which teams are probably getting partner in each region. These are just rumors, so take this segment with a grain of salt. Some I am more confident in than others. In North America, the likely partner teams are Team Liquid, SSG, and C9, with Liquid and C9 as newcomers to OWCS. I'm very confident that Liquid secured the spot, as I have pretty direct confirmation for that one, but SSG and C9 are a little less clear, especially C9. For reference, SSG has pretty much confirmed that they're moving to NA with a tweet from the owner. We'll see how it pans out. What we do know for sure is that neither Toronto Defiant or NRG obtained one of the partnered slots. The partner choices in NA aren't official, but the reactions to Toronto and NRG leaving the scene haven't been great. The decision to leave them out of the partner program is controversial. My impression from the decisions made in my conversations with those who are more involved in the scene is that partnered teams are chosen based on the overall influence of an organization and their willingness to invest and dump money into Overwatch. This means that grassroots and smaller organizations such as Nightmare or Ex Oblivione aren't really in the running for the partner program. This also means that performance in the OWCS doesn't mean much in terms of obtaining a partner slot. I actually agree with this choice. It makes more sense to bring larger orgs into the game that are willing to pay players higher salaries and will sell more merch and skins. With these criteria in mind, it makes sense why Toronto didn't get partner, and I think they handled the decision pretty well. They retired their brand and gave their fans one last goodbye. I'm sad to see Toronto go, but it seems like they're keeping their options open to return as the Toronto Ultra in the future if they obtain partner in a future season. NRG, on the other hand, was a bit of a mess. NRG kind of threw a fit on the way out. I say this as someone who feels that NRG should have gotten the slot. Andy Miller, the founder of NRG, wrote a tweet saying things like NRG are the winningest team and that we don't know why and we are crushed, referring to the fact that they did not get partner. NRG definitely had massive potential to sell skins and keep fans engaged. Before new leaks came through, I was convinced the 3 partners were Liquid, SSG, and NRG. It just made more sense, but C9 must have swooped in and stolen the slot. It makes sense that C9 is included because they're a massive organization, but that leaves us with SSG versus NRG. In my opinion, what made the difference was the investment from each team last season. NRG performed well this year, but they kind of did the bare minimum. They paid very low salaries, and it was leaked that players were only making $1,700 a month, and the team succeeded mostly due to the content output and marketability of the team with PGE and Rack Attack. I don't necessarily agree with the decision 100%, but there are valid reasons to give partner to SSG over NRG. I personally don't prefer the bridge burning exit from the scene. It's clear that NRG are upset with the decision, but I also don't think the solution is to try and get the entire scene riled up over the decision. If anything, this significantly lowers the chance of NRG ever obtaining partner in the future. Meanwhile, Toronto never even mentioned the partner program at all and bowed out peacefully, keeping their options open for 2026, showing they are still interested in the OWCS. As one final note, the reason why some teams are choosing to exit the scene when they don't receive partner is because it becomes much more difficult to compete. The partner teams in each region will have much more money and can sign the best players because they have a revenue stream with team skins. It's not impossible to compete with the partner teams, but it is difficult and potentially costly. Overall, though, the partner program is a good thing and will result in much better salaries for the best players, making it easier to live off of the game. Next, the rumored EMEA partners are Twisted Minds and Gen G, with the third unknown at the moment. The first two are probably correct, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. Saudi orgs like Twisted have access to the infinite money glitch, and Gen G have already signed Krusty and seem to be very committed to building a super team in the region. Not much drama over there, which is good. For Asia, I honestly have no clue who's actually getting partnered, but there are rumors of T1 joining the scene and building a super team. Considering T1's reputation in esports, I wouldn't be surprised if they automatically get partnered without question. The final two slots are likely to go to Team Falcons, Zeta Division, or Crazy Raccoon. Since Team Falcons have the infinite money glitch, I wouldn't be surprised if they also easily become partnered compared to CR or Zeta. I have the least information on Asia, so it's mostly speculation, but still interesting to think about. Now, let's go through the format of Stage 1 of the OWCS, as well as its Tier 2 FACEIT counterpart. Teams can have a maximum of 7 players, which is actually a pretty small roster size. 8 or 9 players would have been a better choice, especially considering hero bans are in the mix, but let's just keep moving on. Teams will first compete in an open qualifier for entry into Stage 1. Partner teams get to skip the qualifier, so 3 teams per region will auto-qualify into the OWCS. There is a rank requirement for this qualifier. You must be Masters 1 to compete. This is to reduce the amount of teams in Swiss, which is a good thing, because if you have players under Masters 1, they have essentially zero chance of making it past the Swiss rounds anyways. In past Swiss tournaments, we've had situations where 2 plat teams duke it out and go on for over an hour, rulebooking each other and pausing and generally wasting everyone's time. Trust me on this, a rank requirement is such a good change. There will not be a rank requirement for FACEIT League, and that's how future teams will qualify to the OWCS anyways. The rank requirement only applies to this specific qualifier, so don't worry if you're Masters 2 or something and really wanted to compete. The Swiss stage will have set map types, moving from control to escort to push, making it simple to keep things moving. Matches are first to 2, and there will be no hero bans in the Swiss stage. After 6 rounds, the top 16 teams from Swiss advance to the bracket stage. In the bracket, matches are first to 3, and hero bans and map picks go back to normal. The top 5 teams from this bracket will advance to OWCS Stage 1, with a total of 8 teams competing. My assumption is that this qualifier will not be broadcasted, so if you want to follow it, you might need to follow player streams, the tournament page, or other resources. Thankfully, this will be the last Swiss qualifier for OWCS, after having to deal with it every stage last year. The actual tournament begins on Friday, January 31st. EMEA matches will always occur at 12 p.m. EST or 6 p.m. CET. NA matches will start directly afterwards around 4 p.m. EST or 10 p.m. CET. Since OWCS runs on a rolling schedule, some broadcasts may run longer and some shorter. The schedule for OWCS is actually really consistent and easy to follow this year. Starting on the 31st, OWCS will run broadcasts at the same times on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The regular season lasts 4 weeks, ending on Sunday, February 23rd. Playoffs for EMEA and NA begin the week after on Saturday, March 1st, and run on Saturdays and Sundays for 2 weekends, ending on March 9th. After that, we have a long empty period before the promotion and relegation bracket that will be played on April 13th. The first international LAN is most likely to take place between the playoffs and this relegation bracket. Promotion and relegation is a new feature this year and is actually a massive improvement from the Overwatch League, which didn't have relegation. FACEIT League will now be acting as the lower division below the OWCS, so the best FACEIT League master teams will have a chance to compete with the worst OWCS teams for their slots. As far as I'm aware, partner teams can get relegated as well, which is a good thing, although the chances of that happening are quite low. The promotion and relegation bracket is simple. It's a one-day tournament where the top 2 FACEIT League teams and the bottom 2 OWCS teams fight for 2 OWCS slots. The bracket is likely to be double elimination, and the matches will be broadcasted at normal match times. This format for NA and EMEA is a massive upgrade compared to last season. I made a video on what I felt was wrong with Overwatch esports a while back, and the new format, it just fixes most of them. partner teams, regular scheduled match times that are easy to follow, promotion and relegation. The next season, the OWCS is shaping up to potentially be one of the best tournaments in Overwatch history, potentially even improving on the Overwatch League. There's a lot of potential here, so I'm really excited. I want to talk about the international LANs, but first let's quickly cover Asia because unfortunately things got worse for the Asian circuit. We have the same three regions, Korea, Japan, and Pacific. This year, Australia is included in the Pacific region, hooray, but New Zealand is not, which is not cool. My assumption is that this is due to server issues with New Zealand. Connections can be inconsistent, and that can cause issues during official matches. That's my best guess. In each individual tournament, Korea, Japan, and Pacific, 9 teams will be competing. Stage 1 teams will be determined by an open qualifier similar to NA and EMEA, with the 3 partnered teams auto-qualifying, and they'll probably just be in OWCS Korea, so for Japan and Pacific it'll be 9 open slots for that open qualifier. The bottom 3 teams in each tournament will enter a relegation bracket against the top 3 from Stage 2 open qualifier. Asia does not have a Tier 2 circuit for Korea, Japan, or Pacific, so open qualifiers are unfortunately the only way for teams to qualify. A lack of a Tier 2 scene isn't great for Asia. Players can't develop their skills, and anyone who doesn't make it into the top 9 teams is pretty much left out. They can only compete in smaller regional tournaments for tiny prize pools. The Asia LAN has also been reformatted to be, well, worse. Now, an online group stage will decide who goes to the Asia LAN, and it's formatted so the top Pacific and Japanese teams are forced to beat one of the top Korean teams to make it to LAN. Next year, only 4 teams get to go to the LAN instead of 8, which is a huge downgrade and crushing for the Japanese and Pacific regions. Reaching the final Asia LAN was a huge goal for those teams last year, and now they're essentially left out, which isn't really fair. And now for the worst news. Asia will only have 2 slots for international LANs this year, just like last year, while NA and EMEA are likely to keep their 3 slots. At both international LANs last season, the Korean teams placed top 2. In Dallas, they were so dominant that a Western team couldn't even take a map off of them. They could only compete with each other. Nothing else was close. Asia deserves a 3rd slot, but they aren't getting it this year. To conclude this video that has gone on much longer than I initially expected, let's talk about LANs. There will be 3 LANs this year rather than 2, but that doesn't exactly mean that the LANs this year will be better. This is another section where I'm going to discuss some rumors and leaks, so if you aren't interested in that kind of stuff, feel free to click away. The official LAN schedule hasn't been released yet as of me making this video, but I have an idea of where they will be located, and the first rumored location is the most interesting. The first LAN is likely in Asia, with the country likely being China. I've heard several different locations for the exact city in China, but it seems like China is, at the moment, the likely location. This also means we'd likely see a Chinese circuit separate from Asia announced for the next season of OWCS, and they might even get their own LAN slot. This could be an explanation for why Asia didn't get another slot, because China's being added. A bit of evidence for the reintroduction of Overwatch esports in China include this reply in a Reddit post stating, one of the biggest casters, won't say who because I don't know what they were allowed to say, at DreamHack confirmed China, and was very confident one of the LANs would be there. I don't know what they knew leading up to that point. Another broadcast talent I spoke to didn't seem to know much at all and claimed to have just seen it for the first time live, so take it with a grain of salt, but I choose to believe. For reference, my personal source was not a caster, so this backs up my initial source. Another relevant post is from Chen regarding OWCS in China, stating they are likely to have their own circuit, and yet another piece of evidence is the return of the Pro Chaser Cup that is officially sponsored by Overwatch and NetEase. If teams from China do qualify for OWCS, it might be through alternative means, such as through a qualifier tournament or something similar. We might not have a consistently streamed OWCS circuit in the country straight away. Considering OWCS hasn't been announced for China yet, they are still clearly working on the details if China will return at all, so they don't have everything figured out. We will have to wait to see what happens. If China isn't the location for the first LAN, I would assume it would be Korea or Japan. The second LAN is unfortunately the most controversial topic, and the topic I was least looking forward to covering in this video. The second LAN will occur during the summer, and is most likely located in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. It is unclear whether or not this would mean that EWC is the LAN, or if OWCS and EWC would be played back to back separately, but either way, the location is problematic. I would assume the reasoning behind this decision would be to save money, since players would already be going to Riyadh to attend EWC, and if the LAN itself is EWC, that saves even more money for OWCS. Faceit League is also Tier 2 this year, which means it can't be used to qualify teams to EWC, and I suspect that OWCS Stage 2 might directly qualify to EWC. The schedules also unfortunately align. The planned LAN 2 is right around the time EWC will occur. I'm going to make this very quick and not delve too deep into the issue since it's pretty simple anyways. For certain groups of people, Saudi Arabia is a very unwelcoming and dangerous country. I'm transgender, and that's just one example of a group that cannot go to Saudi Arabia without risking deportation or worse. The Saudi government actively prosecutes LGBTQ people and also infringes upon religious freedom, which is a human right. An international LAN means people of all nationalities and cultures should be welcome to compete in relative comfort and safety. If you are Christian, you shouldn't have to hide that. If you're gay, you shouldn't have to hide that. If you are Jewish, Muslim, trans, bi, anything else, you shouldn't have to hide that. This goes for everyone, no matter your religion, identity, or culture. Different cultures may have disagreements, but the location of the LAN should be safe for everyone. Although I didn't agree with the concept of EWC last year, it was at least still separate from OWCS. EWC was an option, and you didn't need to compete to stay in the OWCS as a competitor. But if an OWCS LAN is in Riyadh, whether it's EWC or not, it will force players and staff to choose between traveling to Saudi Arabia or essentially ending their careers. That, to me, is crossing a line that is entirely unacceptable. Nobody should ever have to make a choice between their career and placing themselves in extreme discomfort or danger. The whole reason we have things like Calling All Heroes is so that minority talent can improve, and they have. So how do you go ahead and tell all those players, many of whom who are transgender, that they need to be willing to go to Saudi Arabia or just give up on competing at the highest level? EWC should be a choice, not a requirement, until Saudi Arabia's government can update its laws to ensure safety for everyone, including its own citizens. And for the record, my issue lies with the Saudi government and not its citizens. I will leave some resources regarding Saudi Arabia in the description if you want to learn more about their legal system and restrictions on religion and LGBTQ people. Now, let's finally move on to the last LAN. It's likely located in North America. I'm not as confident on this one as the other two because there's less evidence and I also have less sources kind of saying this, but I feel it's very probable. It would be logical to hold a LAN in each general region, one in Asia, one in EMEA, and one in North America. Honestly, I'm a little disappointed that we might not be getting a Europe LAN, but we'll just have to wait and see. The LAN locations are obviously speculation. I do have sources backing up these locations, but at the end of the day, things can always change. Considering the LANs haven't been announced yet, they are likely still working on all the details, so locations could be slightly altered or entirely different. Honestly, I really hope I'm wrong. I'm only specifically talking about these locations, especially the second LAN, because of the high probability that the locations are correct. This was a much longer video than anticipated, but that's okay, because there was just a lot to talk about. This upcoming season of the OWCS is looking to be better than the previous season. Yes, there are some potential downsides, but the positives far outweigh the negatives at the moment, and I mean that. The staff behind OWCS do care, and the decisions such as LAN locations aren't entirely within their control, and I actually know that for a fact. So we can't place much blame on them. Let's focus on the positives next season and do the best we can to support the tournament next year. That's everything I have for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next year.